Welcome to this episode of Fear Less, Do More. Today I'm joined by Sophia Gowland, who is the founder of the Petite Agency. I first came across Sophia last year when we were sponsoring the Tees Tech Awards, and she won an award. And everybody on my table and around me said, she's one to watch. You've got to get to know her. So today I'm hoping that we'll explore what led her to set up the business. I know she set it up in the pandemic, which is a brave thing to do, but also to understand a bit more about the business, which is a marketing agency, but it's very focused on personal brand. Hi Sophia, thank you for joining me this morning.
Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. I'm going to just jump straight in here. Why on earth would you set up your own business at the start of a pandemic?
Do you know what? Many people say to me, I was either really stupid or really brave. 4 years in, I feel like I'm starting to prove that I was brave, but at the start, it did feel quite stupid. And I don't really know why, if I'm honest. Like my career, like all of my milestones in my career, like the jobs that I'd had and the roles that I'd done had been leading up to that. And I always knew that's what I wanted to do, but I just couldn't ever see a time when I'd have the confidence to do it. And I just thought, I'm never going to do it. And you know, when people say you have your 9 to 5 and then you need to graft on your 5 to 9 after that as well. I tried to do it, and I tried to have Petite Agency as my 5 to 9 as a freelance social media manager, and I just couldn't make it work. And then all of a sudden when lockdown hit, I thought, everything's upside down. I still really want to have a business. And what would be the harm in making one more thing turn upside down? So that's what I did. And it's working so far.
So when you say it sort of led up, everything had led up to that.
Yeah.
Was this a sort of lifelong ambition to have your own business?
I don't think I really realised that it was. But when I look back, I think I was always leading up to it. Yeah. So I'd done a business management degree at university. And when I left there, I got a job pretty quickly as a marketing/operations manager for an SME business. And so he was just starting up. So I learned a lot about all the different elements of startup from him, because you've just got to get your hands dirty, haven't you, in situations like that. And you've got to do a little bit of everything, and your actual job title doesn't matter. You've just got to do all sorts. So I learned loads about how a startup works there. Then I moved on to an accountancy firm where I was the marketing and BD manager. And they were very corporate, and I learned a lot about the business development side of it there. And so I went to a lot of networking events, met a lot of business owners, built up my little black book, which became important later on during that COVID time. And I learned the importance of your connections and building up your network in business. And then I moved on to an agency, a marketing agency. And that's where I realised I just belonged in my career. I loved being in an agency. I mean, my first day I walked in, and I think there was about 30, 40 members of staff. And I thought, I hope I fit in, I hope it's all okay. And they were having this conversation saying that the sales team had hit target, and they were all going to Amsterdam 2 weeks later to celebrate. So I was thinking, do I have to hold the fort in the business while they all go? Because I hadn't been part of that target. And then they invited me and I went with them. And I just thought, wow, I love this environment. I love the people that work in agencies. I love the clients. I love the chaos of it. So then after I'd worked there as project manager for a couple of years, then I went to a construction company as a marketing manager. And then that's where I learned the kind of relentless hard work that it takes to run a business from the owner. So all of that kind of taught me all the little parts of Petite. So then when lockdown hit and I started it, I just thought, you know what? I'm going to try. And even if it fails, I don't care anymore, because I'd rather try and fail than just never try at all. So that was kind of what led to it all.
And when you said you had your sort of black books that you built up in terms of contacts, that must have been quite challenging though in trying to do that in COVID, where you weren't allowed to just say, should we meet up for a coffee? Should I pop out and see you? Shall I see you at this networking event? How did you manage that?
Exactly, yeah. So I had this idea because I'd had that black book and I'd worked around a lot of these people. I had quite a few phone calls of people ringing me going, oh, well, what's your employer doing to manage this? And do you know what that company's doing about that? And I thought, people seem to be ringing me to ask me these questions that I don't personally have the answers to, but I know the people who do have the answers. Maybe I could somehow connect them. So that's kind of what the campaign was, supporting Teesside in crisis, was what I called it. And it was just to try and connect all these people who didn't have that black book that I had. Because I didn't have a business, so I didn't feel well equipped to give people the answers. I just kind of felt like a bit of an imposter going, yeah, I know the people, you talk to them. So that's what it was about. And then lucky enough, people were just quite friendly and just really supportive, and they liked my idea. And so many people encouraged it. So I just thought, you know what, I'm going to make a video, put it out on LinkedIn and see if anyone gets involved. And that video ended up reaching, I think it was over 250,000 people. I had all sorts of business owners contacting me saying, can I be part of the campaign? And then all of a sudden it kind of became its own little business for a while. And then the people that I already knew in my network, I was like, can you just do a video for me? And can you just say this and say what you could offer and say how you could support people? And people were just, as you remember, were just really open to supporting other businesses, especially smaller ones at that time. So although I couldn't meet up with them, I kind of was lucky enough to already have the relationship where I could pick up the phone and say, help me, I'm doing this. So
yeah, I think it was a time when collaboration really came to the fore, and people did put aside all sorts of differences and just and offer support to everybody around them, which was a really positive thing. And I think obviously the birth of video really in business came out then, so you got in at the right time. So is that campaign? What happened to that campaign? Is it ongoing? Have you morphed it into other things?
It morphed into Petite Agency basically. So it started with one of my videos just saying, I want to help, this is how I think I'm going to do it. I'll see how it goes. And then I was given weekly updates on LinkedIn, and this is where I started to realise what personal brand was and how it could work. At the time, I wasn't really thinking how it could be an offering in a marketing agency in the future. I was just thinking of what I was doing at the time. So the videos that I was doing were going on my personal LinkedIn, but then I was asking lots of entrepreneurs to do videos, and I thought, well, I can't post that on my account. So then where should I post it? What should I do? So then I had this Petite Agency account set up that was only ever meant to be a teeny tiny little freelancer business on the side. No one would know it was mine. So I thought, I'm just going to use that account. That's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to stick all the videos on there, and Petite Agency can be the home of supporting Teesside in crisis. But then it just rolled into clients came in from it and said they needed help with their marketing. And then this is where the stupid part came in, where I just decided to have my notice in at my job and say, I think this is the right time to leave. And it's probably the only time in life I followed my gut instinct so strongly, because I just thought, this is mad. And on paper, it shouldn't have worked. Everything was going wrong. People were making cutbacks. People were trying to keep all the budgets within the business. People were going out of business, and here's me just going, oh, I'm going to start it and launch it from now. But yeah, it worked. So
what do you think it was that what was the sort of trigger point in that? Did you just, what made you take that final step and go, no, I'm gonna make a go of this?
I think just how much I enjoyed doing the campaign and doing my own thing. Because I'd always been such a hard worker for everyone in business, everyone who I'd worked for. I just always wanted to be the hardest worker in the room. I would graft my backside off for anyone who I worked for, because I loved being around those people, and I loved working directly for the person whose vision it was, that business. I think I just kind of get my energy from it. So I always knew I would want to work with those people in some way, but I never really thought I'd be lucky enough to have it as my business and have them as my clients. I always imagined myself as a manager, and that was my director. And then once the campaign started and it took off, and maybe just that little confidence boost of people believing in me and getting behind me and getting behind it. And I thought, if I can do this, surely I could make a little freelance business work. And then that started to work. And I thought, well, I could take on one member of staff. That wouldn't be the end of the world. Then I did. And then I thought, well, I could take on another member of staff, because now I've got one, I could do two. Now I'm on my third one. So that's just kind of how it's rolling.
So Petite Agency, where did that name come from?
It's a very random name. So obviously, because it was only ever going to be freelance on the side, I never thought it would be my business. And that was the one thing, so even though I work in marketing, it's probably the thing I think I'm bad at, is naming a business. I think it's really hard. And it was one of the things that held me back, like as stupid as it sounds. When I wanted to make it a business, I thought, well, what can I call myself? And I thought, oh, do you know what? I want to kind of relate it back to something that's meaningful to me. So I was thinking about some words that my nana used to say to me, because she was a huge influence on my life. So she used to always say to me, oh, it's just like a silly little phrase. She'd go like, big things come in small packages. And she'd say about me being a petite person. And so I was Googling different words she used to say to me. Petite said attractively small. And I thought that would work for a marketing agency really well, because I don't want it to be this big, huge corporate company where clients feel like they're on a conveyor belt. I actually do want it to be petite in a way, and I want it to feel attractively small. And it's not small because we're not good or we're not growing. It's small because it's intentional, and we work to feel like we're part of your internal team. So it kind of worked. And then when I did start as a business, I thought, I need to change that name. It doesn't work. But then I just thought, you're not going to think of one, just go for it. So
it's got that really personal connection. I think that's a lovely story.
It has, yeah. And I love it now. But for a little while, I thought, are people going to think it's just a silly name? And a few people said, we don't like the name of your business, but I don't know, it works. And it's relatable, isn't it? This is all about personal brand, and it's a personal story. So,
well, I was going to ask you that. So, there's a lot of focus on corporate branding and employer brand. Where does personal brand fit into that? And what does it mean?
So when I was doing that campaign, I didn't realise it at the time, but I was just building up my personal brand, and I built such a good reputation around Teesside. I thought, this is exactly how business owners need to position themselves. And I think people think of personal branding all wrong. They think it's some sort of, they think back to the early Facebook days where you're posting photos of your breakfast or saying something about what you'd watched on Love Island last night. Yeah. But it's so not like that. It's actually just about becoming an authority in your industry and talking about your talents, your skill sets, the people who work for you, the people you work alongside, any trends in your industry, and just becoming that authoritative voice. So when people want your service, you're at the top of their mind, because they think, that girl always talks about that subject. She'll know what she's doing. So that's where the personal brand element of it came through.
And when you've obviously worked with lots of different people with lots of different sort of personal brands, what's been the most sort of intriguing personal brands that you've come across?
There was a guy who we looked after who had a business surrounding mental health awareness and looking after people who were struggling with that and finding ways to take mental health workshops into corporate settings. So it was quite an interesting one to research. It's quite different. We work across a lot of construction and industrial clients for personal brand, whereas this one was quite different for us. So probably a little bit of a challenge in a way, but a really good challenge, because it was really good to research that industry and find out more about it. And you can be so creative with that type of content as well. So that was a really good one to work on.
So how much do you sort of steer somebody into, this is what your personal brand should be for the benefit of your business, as against to somebody coming and saying, this is me, this is what I want to promote? How do you manage that?
I think it's part of the onboarding, when you're asking the questions in the onboarding, sometimes they don't even realise what it is, what their own personal brand is, and they think it's something they're going to create and tell you who they are. But in the onboarding, you're like, this is what we've got from it. This is who you've showed us that you are. Is this the content you'd want to create? And they often think, actually, that is exactly who I want to be, rather than telling us the person that they think they should be. It's about who they really are. So I think it's just the onboarding questions and getting to know them really, really well so that you can speak like them. Because obviously with company brand, tone of voice is a lot easier to get correct. With personal brand, tone of voice is a lot tougher to get it correct, because, if someone was to take over your personal brand tomorrow, it would take them a lot longer to be able to speak like Gill than it would to speak as the brand of Square One Law.
Yeah. And I suppose there's a lot of trust needed there as well, that if you are going to speak on somebody's behalf, that you're going to do it in an authentic way.
Yeah.
But also, that your sort of values are aligned. How do you manage that if you've got somebody who's very, very different to you and would speak in a very, very different way? How do you work out how to pitch that?
So I think you've just got to really get into the head and get to know them really, really well. And in the office, we'll often have conversations, and say there's a topic that comes up, you need to write that for that client, that he would talk about that, he would really like that. And you just get to know them and who they are and what they like, what they would speak about. And a lot of the time, it's not even meetings to do with work. It's more the casual coffee, just to chat about anything, about the kids, the life, the holidays, their ambitions, all that sort of stuff, away from the specific personal brand meeting, I feel like you find out a lot more about them by just having the casual meetings alongside it.
Just popping in to say, if you are enjoying the conversation so far and want to make sure you keep up to date with other episodes, then please hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Let's jump back into the conversation now. I'm going to ask you a really random question now. So, ChatGPT,
Yes.
Everybody's talking about AI and how it's going to completely change marketing. They say the same about legal. It's going to completely change marketing. Nobody will need marketeers. What would you say to that?
I would disagree. However, I think ChatGPT is great if you use it to elevate the content you've already got, not replace it. So I think, and maybe this is just me as a marketer, maybe you tell me different, but when I scroll through LinkedIn, I can see if someone's just copied and pasted a ChatGPT caption, and it's so frustrating.
I think that's your skill.
Okay. But people will start to recognise that because it doesn't sound human. So I think that if I was to give someone a tip to use ChatGPT, I would say write your content first and write it to the point where you're happy with it. So write out exactly what you like and what you think sounds good, what your audience would like, that's your tone of voice, and then ask ChatGPT to see if it could give you 5 ways to improve that copy, and then take little bits from it. Just stop directly copying and pasting it.
Good advice. No, good advice. I mean, I think that resonates with me, because what I want to see when I go through LinkedIn or whatever is authenticity.
Yeah.
And if it's been created, it can cover the topic, but not in an authentic way. I think that's what I want. I want to know who's behind that post and what's important to them. And I think if you're using ChatGPT to produce all of your posts, you probably lose something along the way. But that's my non-marketing head on it.
You lose the message. Sometimes you get a lot of words that sound great, but they say nothing within them.
Right.
And I think that's what I always see from captions. I think, what are you actually trying to tell someone there?
Yeah.
You've just written a really long paragraph of beautifully written words, but your message is lost in it because you've asked a robot to write it and you haven't tried yourself. But I do really like it. I think it's great. And I think I've noticed some of my clients will, like if they send a certain type of email, it'll sound better because I know they've maybe popped it in there first and rewritten it in there. Or I asked a couple of clients recently to leave me reviews on our Google page, and I noticed one of them was written incredibly well, and I thought, you've ChatGPT some of that, but it sounded really, really good.
So you just left that one. You're like, I'll not pull that one.
I'll let that one slide. So it can definitely be used to enhance, but just not to replace, would be my opinion.
And in terms of like your vision for the business, what do you want to do with it?
Do you know what? I feel like I never quite know the answer to this because I never planned on starting the business. And then the first year I was a freelancer. The second year I started to think I can grow it into a business. The third year I started to hire people, and I've got my team in place now. So my full team that I've got now, we've only been a team of 4 since September last year. We're still kind of growing as a team. And I feel like this year is a really important year for us to really elevate the business and bring in more clients and work on our marketing, because it's something I've never had time to do, which is really bad, isn't it? I own a marketing agency and I never have time to do marketing for myself or Petite. And it's an awkward one when you're onboarding someone. You say it's really important, you've got to get your message out. You've got to speak about your values, your company, your culture. And then I look at Petite Agency socials and I'm like, we haven't had time to do our own because we focus on our clients.
I think that happens in all businesses. I think you are focused on your clients predominantly, and quite often your own business gets neglected in various areas. So what would you say, so if you're going to look at that, what would you say your personal brand is?
I think it's very, very authentic, just because of the way it started. I think people have followed my journey literally from a random video saying I want to try and support some people, to then thinking, oh, this could be a business, to then starting it as a business, to then going through like business growth programs, which I think I posted stuff about them, and getting clients, moving offices, posting challenges on there. I think it's very much about that startup journey so far. And I think that's what people quite like, because there's so many people who want to be in business or they're in business already and they've been through that. So I think it's very authentic and very relatable and down to earth, I hope.
And you won an award last year.
Yes, I did, yeah. That I won, I sound like I'm showing up. I won 2 at the Best New Teas Business Awards in 2022 and then Newcomer of the Year at the Teas Tech Awards last year. Yeah.
And how important is it, that sort of thing?
For small businesses, I think it's such good PR, it's such good brand awareness. I think it just gives that people that little bit of trust that you are working really hard and that behind the scenes things are working. It's not just something on social that looks like it's great. It's actually, you've sent in your business credentials and people have agreed, yeah, you're doing good. You deserve to win this award. So we did actually get quite a few new clients in from the award wins, which is really nice. And even just this month, we've just signed a new client, which is like a really big brand, someone who I'm excited to work with. And I said, can I just ask how you heard about us? Where did you find us? And he said, I've been following you for a while. I remember you from your award win. So I thought, she must be good because she's won awards. So I'll keep her in mind for when I want my marketing doing.
Brilliant.
And again, that goes back to personal brand.
Yeah, it does. There's one thing I want to talk to you about, which is something that I think you've got over other businesses, and it's a really, really important thing, which is that you have a marketing assistant.
Exactly, yeah.
I've never met any other business that has a marketing assistant. Would you like to tell us about what that is?
It's so funny because I used to take the mick out of my mum for being a crazy dog lady. She was to the levels where I thought, what on earth? How can you possibly be that mentally insane and crazy about your dog? And now I am that person. I threw Hank a birthday party a couple of weeks ago. He had a second birthday party in my house and we invited loads of dogs round. And I got cake and I cut up carrots and put out snacks and everything for them all. So I am that level of crazy dog lady. But yeah, I've named him as the marketing assistant for Petite because he is there 3 days a week normally. And you know what? He brings a nice vibe to the office. Like, you can't deny that a dog just being in the office, it just makes you happier just because they're there laid on the back, chilling, waiting for someone to pet them or give them a snack. He helps us all get our steps in because we all take him for a walk down the river on our dinner break together. So we all get a couple of thousand steps in on a dinner break. So it's really useful there. I took him once to a networking event and he's actually a really good BD manager as well. So he could be promoted because he went round to every person in the room and I got round the full room because Hank led round and it was just like the best way of talking to so many people. So it's probably quite a good tip to take your dog to a networking event.
He's a dachshund as well, isn't he?
Yeah.
And I have a dachshund as well. So yours is clearly, Hank is a lot better trained than George is.
I don't know about that.
Taking George around a marketing event like that he would just be barking at everybody. Does he always behave himself or is he?
No, definitely not. He's even had wheeze and poos in my clients' offices as well in the past, which was quite embarrassing. So I've been sat on my hands and knees picking up wee in a client meeting about personal brand or social media.
That's when you know that you've got a good close relationship with your clients if they'll tolerate it.
I know, and they've let him back in as well, so they must be nice people.
But I think that's quite a strong bit of your personal brand, isn't it? And I think you see nowadays lots of people are happy to show a personal side to them as well as their corporate side, and I think that makes us more interested in that person.
It makes you just seem more human, doesn't it? You just want to know a little bit more about what that person's into in their life and what they're like, and you can find ways to relate to them a bit more, can't you? I know I said personal brand is about your industry and your knowledge and your opinions and your authority in your industry, but at the same time, people want to know that you're human too. And if you're an animal lover, that's something people really relate to, or a car lover, you've been to a certain place on holiday, whatever it is, people do just want to relate to what you're going through or what you're up to.
Because if you look at LinkedIn, there's quite often a bit of backlash when people post personal stuff and people go, this isn't the place for this. LinkedIn is a professional platform. You know, you should go and take that to Facebook, all of that sort of stuff. What's your view on that?
I just think let people post what they want to post. It's not harming anyone. And I also do think, although LinkedIn is the professional platform, but professionals have lives as well. I wouldn't want to scroll through and just see everyone talking about the work day or the services or trying to sell. You don't want to be sold to, do you? You also want to build those relationships online. It goes back to people buy from people, and how can you look human online if all you're doing is talking about your products and services? So there's probably a line somewhere, but I feel like I've not really seen people overstep it on LinkedIn. No one I follow anyway.
So what, outside of work and the agency, and obviously, you know, setting up a business and growing a business is hard work. It takes up a lot of time.
It does, yeah.
What do you do in your spare time? What do you do to have fun, to chill out?
Do you know what's funny? So I've literally just put a post on my personal Instagram, and I looked back to when I last posted on there, and it was 651 days ago, because I have been that busy with the business and with everything that comes with it. My own personal life just got completely neglected, and it probably reflected on like how much I saw my friends, what I was doing with my own hobbies. So I don't feel like I've had any for years now, but my latest hobby is actually going to the gym. And that is nothing I ever thought would leave my mouth. But I've been really, really good. I joined in November because I thought this is the time. You know, you've got your team now. The business is steady and it's work, and you don't need to be in it 24/7. You know, you should actually do some things that help you as well. So I've started going to the gym now, which I quite enjoy. And Hank is just my life outside of work as well.
Did you make a special dog cake for him?
I ordered one because I don't think he'd want to make one that I'd made, but I did order him one.
Very good, very good. This podcast is called Fear Less, Do More. When have you been most scared in your, either in your career or in your personal life?
Oh, good question. Do you know what? I think it's probably going back to when I started the business and what I was saying about it being such a mad time. And, you know, I didn't have any investment. I didn't have mentors. I don't have any friends or family who were in business. So it was very much just me bootstrapping a business and hoping for the best. So that was probably when I was most scared about what was going to happen next.
And what advice would you give to somebody who was sitting in that position now thinking, should I do it? Should I not?
Don't overthink it. Don't worry if you'll fail, and don't worry about what other people think. Because I think those three things stopped me from doing it for a long time. I was 29 when I started my business, and really it had been in my head for longer than that, but I just didn't dare, because I thought, what if it fails? I'll be embarrassed. And what if people think, oh, she doesn't know what she's doing, or people see me fail and think, oh, she's clueless or whatever. And yeah, just overthinking it all, thinking you're not ready to start it, thinking, oh, I'll start it next month because I'll have watched these 10 podcasts or read this book by then, or whatever it is that you think you need to be ready for. Like, now is the best time, just start.
And how much did you sort of plan in terms of, you know, like you just said, reading management books or going and getting specific business advice?
I didn't. When I started it, eventually I just thought, you've got to do it. You know, you've been in marketing for long enough. You've worked around all these entrepreneurs for years. You've read the books, you listen to the podcasts. I loved all of that type of lifestyle anyway. I love, you know, watching Dragon's Den, watching The Apprentice, listening to Stephen Bartlett podcasts. It was just the time where I thought, stop overthinking it and just start. I've got a client who says this really good phrase around that. And he just says something around, you'll learn more by doing than you ever will by reading or listening or research. Like, doing is the best way to learn. So just do it. So I think I got to the stage where I finally thought, just do it and you'll figure it out along the way.
And I think the pandemic was a bit of a crash course for a lot of people on to how to do things, because we were all faced with, whether you had an established business that you'd been involved with for a while or it was a new business, you were faced with circumstances that nobody had ever encountered.
Exactly.
So everybody was winging it.
Yeah,
during
exactly.
So that's, you know, that should give you comfort that I don't think anybody had a plan that they rolled out and said, this is what happens now.
Exactly, yeah. And speaking of winging it, so that is something that prepped me, actually. So although we weren't allowed to see anyone, I did find out that a really inspirational entrepreneur from Teesside lived on a farm not far away from me, just as I was trying to start my business. And so I socially distanced, popped to see him, because he very kindly agreed to meet with me. And he knew about the campaign, he'd seen what I was doing, and he was like, it seems really impressive. Like, what's your plan next? And I said, I want to start a business, but I daren't, because I feel like I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm just worried about failing, really. And he was like, but no one knows what they're doing. Everyone just has to figure it out. So why would you be worried about that? And I was like, well, you know what you do. And he went, I still don't know what I'm doing now. And, you know, this guy's hugely, hugely successful. And just those words, I think, were a really good encouragement just to get started. I thought, if you can say you don't know what you're doing and you've achieved what you've achieved, then hopefully I could do the same.
Yeah, I think part of that is that people like to present a public face that's very resilient, very lacking in vulnerability of any kind. And actually the reality behind it is that a lot of us don't really, you know, we don't. I'm a lawyer by trade, and I've become running a business. I wasn't trained as to how to do that. You pick it up along the way. And as I say, COVID was the biggest crash course in change management that I think anybody could go on.
Yeah, exactly.
So just to sort of tie things together, as the podcast is called Fear Less, Do More. We've talked about a lot about things that you feared and how you've overcome that. What would you like to do more of in the future?
I would like to step out of my comfort zone more in business. I feel like in the 4 years, I started to get quite comfortable with just doing the client work, doing all the internal stuff and working in the business. But now it's time to do more things where I'm working on the business and doing things that are outside of my comfort zone. Like this, for example, when I first got the email, I thought, oh, no, I don't want to be on a podcast. But then I thought, no, you've got to do that. You've got to step outside your comfort zone, even if it's things that aren't really what you'd be comfortable with doing and you might be fearing doing them. You've just got to do it.
Just do it. Great way to end. I think somebody might have trademarked that though, so we'll
Stolen Nike's tagline.
Thanks very much for talking to me today.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed that episode of our podcast, Fear Less, Do More. If you did, then please follow or subscribe. If you enjoyed what we talked about in this episode, then you might enjoy this one here, which is also linked in the show notes. Thanks for listening.